This is Deric Hughes.
And Ben Raab. And you're watching the TV Writer podcast. Really? Is it that hard?
I thought you were gonna go. See,
right.
This is how the
partnerships. Yes.
Like this, we're like a Swiss watch.
My name is Gray Jones, and I want to welcome you to the TV Writer Podcast, partner of Script Magazine, episode 100 for June 2nd, 2020. Well, today, for episode 100, I'm excited to bring you a writing team, Deric Hughes and Benjamin Raab, currently co-executive producing on Legacies on the CW, who have written and produced on Arrow, Scream the Series, The Flash, Beauty and the Beast, and Warehouse 13. In particular, they have some great things to say about NBC Writers on the Verge, which really got them their start on being on Warehouse 13 with Jack Kenny and how it was such a supportive room. And also the showrunner training program, which they are currently a part of. They're almost finished. Got interrupted because of the virus. But you're going to love the interview. It's a very long interview, and they have lots of great tips on being a TV writer in this industry. This episode is sponsored by Pilar Alessandra of OnThePage.tv. Be sure to check out all the resources and classes on her site, and she also offers one-on-one coaching via Zoom. TV Writer Podcast viewers can get 10% off on any of her services. Just reach out to Pilar directly and tell her I sent you. If you want to help me to continue to bring these weekly episodes to you, please consider becoming a patron or sponsor for as little as 25 cents per episode. And there are reward levels for different amounts. Visit tvwriterpodcast.com/support for details. But now on to my interview with Deric Hughes and Benjamin Raab. Enjoy. Well, this is Gray, and I'm here with writing team Deric Hughes and Benjamin Raab, currently co-executive producing or about to co-executive produce on Legacies on the CW, and who have written and produced some of my favorite series, Arrow, Scream the Series, Flash, Beauty and the Beast, and Warehouse 13. How you guys doing?
Good, thank you.
Great, thanks.
And
how about yourself?
I appreciate you guys being here despite the quarantine. We're actually recording this in April for June 2nd release. So just a caveat on anything that's said here. What we say may not actually come to pass. But let's roll. So you guys became a writing team when and why?
About 19 years ago.
Yeah.
It happened in a comic book shop, believe it or not.
Seriously?
Yeah. Yep, seriously, in a comic book shop. We call it our geek cute. I was a comic book writer professionally at the time, former editor at Marvel. I'd moved out from New York to California in 1999 at the end of the year, and been living out here a couple of years, and getting my books every Wednesday, like one does, at the store, and just kind of keeping a low profile. Usually when pros went to the comic book stores, if fans knew who they were, they'd engage and they'd have opinions. And, I had a lot of critics of my work at the time, so I like to keep a low profile. And I hear this, one fanboy at the register complaining about a book being late. And he's, the book was Planetary, which, everyone knows there was that one run where it was like 6 months late and no one knew when it was going to come out. And I think it had been solicited and it just hadn't come out or whatever. And he's complaining book, they said it was coming out today and whatever. And the store owner was like, I don't know, man. And I'm like, he's like, these lazy artists never turned in their work, playing video games all the time. And I'm listening to this and I'm going, I don't know if I should say something. And I'm like, well, hey man, I know for a fact that the reason why your book's late is not because this artist is, lazy and playing video games. It's because he hasn't received a script in 6 months. And he's like, well, how do you know? I'm like, because the guy you're insulting was the groomsman at my wedding. So that fanboy was Deric A. Hughes.
Yeah.
I will say that to my defense, I didn't know who he was.
Yeah.
And so I was not one of his critics.
Yeah. So then you got started talking, and what made you decide to write together?
Well, I was my journey is a bit different from Ben's. Former military brat. And then I was in the military myself, but before that, I was also a track and field athlete, and that was my first passion and love. And I wanted to run the Olympics and really focused on that until injury set back. And after I got out of college, and I started working in the industry. At first, at various assistant jobs, and then I landed a job as a writer's assistant on a show called Gene Roddenberry's Andromeda, which sci-fi series back in the early 2000s, starring Kevin Sorbo, created by Robert Wolfe, or I should say developed by Robert Wolfe because it was Gene Roddenberry's idea. But Robert Wolfe, a dear friend of ours now, at the time my boss, hired me to be a writer assistant on that job. And that's where I really started. My eyes were open to the possibility of pursuing a television writing career. So every Wednesday, go down to the comic book store, which is right down the street in Studio City, to go pick up my books. And yeah, Planetary being one of my favorite was not there. And I started being the angry fanboy. And when Ben finally corrected me, I was like, and you are, and he goes, I'm Ben Raab. And I always tell people, it's like, he didn't do it in a way like you should know who I'm in. He was just introducing himself. But I was like, that name sounds so familiar. And the comic book store owner goes, oh, that's, this Ben, he wrote Excalibur, X-Men, blah, blah, blah. And I looked at him and I was, man, I always thought you were just older. I was like an old fat dude, because growing up, like in the 80s, there was a certain sort of type of guy that I always saw as the comic book writer, and Ben looking like a rock star looked like none of these guys. And I was like, wait, you can be a comic book writer? And as luck would have it, he had just moved out here, and he was looking to make a transition from comics into television and film. So when we found out what I did, I'm going to just pick my brain over lunch, and we discovered we had so many things in common, right down to our birthdays being 3 days apart. We slowly started collaborating on ideas, first in the feature world, thinking that we're going to write a couple of features and stuff. But then Robert encouraged us, saying, hey, you guys come up with some ideas, come in and pitch, and you might be able to get a freelance episode if I like one of them. So we did that with all the confidence of believing that we were going to get a freelance episode. And then the day we went in, Hollywood stepped in and fired Robert from the show. It was like the company was, it was like that first sort of that first taste of harsh reality in Hollywood, right? So close. And then so Robert, left the show. We were kind of like, well, damn, what are we going to do now? Well, if we're really going to pursue this, then we need to do all the right things, which is write scripts and get representation. So we did, and the first thing we wrote was, they say write what you know. So our first script was we wrote a Smallville, and so it was a Smallville, was a sample between seasons 2 and 3, or 1 and 2, I believe.
1 and 2.
And yeah, it was between seasons 1 and 2. Yeah, it just come out. We wrote a Smallville sample, and it got us our first manager. And then shortly after that, we wrote an Alias, and that got us our first agent. And we were off to the races, where we were just trying to break into television. It took us 8 years to break into television.
Wow.
We submitted every summer. We would submit to the writing programs and get rejected. We'd keep writing specs. We did a Nip Tuck. We did an Alias. We did
original
CSI. And then we wrote a Rescue Me, and that was the one that really kind of opened a lot of doors for us.
Yeah.
And so, had you ever considered writing individually, or did it just happen that you guys were writing together?
We were already writing individually at that point in time, and Ben was like, definitely, he wrote like a couple of X-Men scripts. I mean, he was just like, he was already a professional writer, much more than I was. I was just more entrenched
because they paid me for it
in the entertainment industry. And that those two bridges hadn't yet really quite connected the way they do now with the books and television and film. And so when Ben was looking at make that, we just sort of like, well, we had so many likes in common that it was just natural to sort of like, hey, well, let's just start, working on ideas together, and not really sort of forming a partnership right away. It wasn't until when we decided to embark on, like, okay, well, since we wrote this, we came with a lot of cool ideas, and we wrote this cool script. and people seem to be interested in us. Let's make this a bit more official. Like once we actually got representation and we started representing ourselves as a team and understanding, how to brand ourselves, that was really sort of like, okay, we're on this journey. And then, a couple of good friends of ours that were writing teams like Ashley Miller and Zach Stentz. Miller and Stentz, they really sort of were like sort of a template in that way, because these guys were television writers and then they were feature writers, and they were very successful in that way. And seeing like, oh, how it could be done, and they were just like, all right, let's go ahead and do this, and it was just by our powers combined, we Voltroned up in that way.
Yeah. But then we did it. We did, we did our work, not because it took so long to get into film and television. We did other things. We did, we created our comic book, Living in Infamy, which was a 4-issue miniseries that we published with a friend of ours. That was, basically about a witness protection town for reformed supervillains. So it's like, I'd been writing Green Lantern for DC Comics, and then I got fired off of that. And so it was like, well, what's next? And I wanted to still, comics was always a first love, obviously, but I wasn't able to sort of find work in that space as much as I used to be able to. And because people had come into different management positions and weren't fans of my work. So it's like, well, I gotta do it elsewhere, but I still want to do that genre. And I had this idea for like at 3 o'clock in the morning, just the name Living in Infamy popped into my head. And then I was like, well, what is that? And, by the end of the day, I had the idea, which was, it's a witness protection town for reformed supervillains, and it's a suburban family drama with a twist. And I told Derek the next day, and he told Ashley Miller, who told our publisher Robert Burnett, who then put the money up for us to self-publish it, which we did back in 2005 and 2006, which was fantastic because it was us working together for the first time as a team. Really, writing specs is one thing, but when you're actually creating IP or content, it's a different ballgame. And now we had something that was ours, and that kind of set the tone for here's who we are as creators. If anything really established our brand, it was that comic book, and that then got us work. Because Derek, his mutant ability is to know everybody and meet everybody and be their friend, which is great because I'm the misanthropic hermit back home.
Well, we're now all hermits now, thanks to the quarantine.
So I've been ready for this for years. But he made a lot of friends, worked with a lot of different people, and because of his being out there, we were able to then get work in the new media space. We worked on, or transmedia, I believe it was called at the time. We worked on a web series called Afterworld, which was a 120 episode. No,
it was 130, wasn't it?
So some insane number of episodes, but it was 5 days a week, 3 to 4 minute increments, rolled out online. This is around 2007. It was created by Brent Friedman, Stan Rogo, and Jeff Sagansky, and so that was became our first writer's room experience, or my first writer's room experience, I should say. But again, it was all these little incremental steps that we took as a writing team to sort of establish who we are and what we do that set us apart from other people, so that by the time we got to 2008, when, at this point I got 2 kids, I was supposed to be a 5-year plan. It turned into an 8-year plan. My wife was very patient about that. And, and I said to Derek, I'm like, look, man, we keep submitting to these writing programs and we keep getting rejected. I don't know how much longer I can go on. And that was the year that we actually got accepted into NBC's Writers and The Verge. And that's where our career, as a writing team kind of took off in television.
Yeah.
Very cool. That was just after the writer's strike too.
Yes.
And what was that Writers on the Verge like? What was your experience going through that program?
That was great. I mean, our teachers were Erica Kinnair, and who is now with the Berlanti Company, and then Jen Grisanti, who were just fantastic. And they really cared about nurturing a next generation of talent, finding people who, they've got the ability, they just don't have the access, or they just don't have the resource. And so part of what the program did was, in addition to, back then it was you'd write a spec and then an original sample. I think now it's just originals. I think it's become more of a farm team for pilots for the studios. But they would pair you up with agents if you didn't have representation, or managers. They They give you a network executive to sort of be a mentor. They gave you a creative executive to be a mentor. It was just really cool. It was a great program. And I definitely recommend people, submit to it if they're interested and they want to break in and they feel like I need that extra. Yeah.
At that point in time, it was the program was basically sort of like Erica Kanair had restarted it. It was like one version of it, and then this was like the 2.0 version. And we were the second class in that new version of that. And out of 600 people that submitted for the program, they only select 8 writers. Yeah. Since then, it's like last year, I believe it was like over 1,800 writers that submitted. Yeah. And in a large part, again, it's like, as they explained it, the people that you're that are submitting, they're all your peers. These are all the people that are assistants, writers' assistants, agents' assistants, people that are production, so forth and so on, that you're really applying to, against. And then, but like the Disney Fellowship, that's global. Like people apply from all around the world. So there's hundreds of thousands. So that year when we applied to like all 4 programs that were existing at that time. And we actually got into 3 out of the 4.
Really?
And we chose the Writers on the Verge just because we had the reputation and our relationship with Erica, and we were like, okay, you know what, we feel confident enough that this could actually turn into something. And like you said, 5 weeks
in them first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, no, I was saying it was also Chris too. Yeah, but they were a little slow on the take. But it all happened within like a couple of days apart from one another when we started getting word. Wow. And it was just, but that was just the strongest one in our opinion. And then I think it was about a month later when we got the rejection letter from Disney. We're like, we don't care.
Yeah. Well, at least that was consistent.
How many years had you applied before you got accepted?
I think it was like almost every year.
Yeah, but every NBC was the first and only time we submitted to that. We didn't even know it existed until we met with Erica in May, and she's like, I really think you should submit. And then 3 months later, we did.
The other ones, I think, it's like couple of at least three years or something like that. Yeah, where they'd come around like, all right, let's go ahead and give it a shot. Stuff.
Yeah, we went out for staffing meetings, and it just never happened.
Yeah. We were up for small
program.
Twice.
Yeah. And with this program, 5 weeks into it, it was a 10-week program. We got staffed on Warehouse 13. So that was our first job. That was 12 years ago.
Wow. And I read a reference somewhere that Jack said something on your first day that really helped. Tell me about just starting in the room with Jack Kenny and what that was like.
That was fantastic. I mean, his thing was, I don't care about rank. I don't care who you are. I don't care if the janitor has a good idea. I want to hear it. And for us as staff writers coming in, where you'd heard, staff writers are supposed to sit down and be quiet. Yeah, that was the complete opposite.
Yeah. You'd heard different things by how different showrunners run their rooms and stuff like that. And so Jeff put all that to put us all at ease at the very beginning. He said, like, you're here for ideas. I need ideas. And if you don't give me ideas, I'm going to find them somewhere else. So, we took that to heart. And then we were working with a lot of great experienced writers that helped us, that first year. But it was just such an easy, fantastic room to be in. It was like we couldn't have asked for a better first staffing experience. Television-wise. We had already had a mini room experience working with Brent Friedman, Stan, over on the Afterworld. So we got a taste of like what a room would be like, especially right down to like, what are we going to eat for lunch today? That sort of thing. But being in a television writing room, that was special. That was really nice. And again, it was like, couldn't ask for a first time better showrunner, and we were able to stay all 5 seasons and really work and grow, and Jack encouraged that, right down to allowing us to go to set now, where the studio wouldn't necessarily pay for us at first, but Jack fought for that too. It was like, because we were so eager, because we were like, we'd love to go to set. Jack encouraged it. Like, you guys want to go to set, go to set.
That was in Toronto, right?
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, Jack, he spent a lot of time there, but he wanted to not have to do that all the time. He wanted to be able to come home and trust that his team could be there covering in his absence. And so, having him put all that kind of faith in relative novices was really cool of him.
And also, it's like in his sort of like his wonderful attitude did not stop just in the room. It was also on set, and it was a reflection of that. Like where you said, it starts at the top, and with him, he set the tone. And so when you go up the set, it was a fantastic set. The cast, they were all great. It was just really it was much more of a family type of setting, and just everybody really wanting to work there. I can never forget how, I think it was like in the second season or something like that, there were a couple of crew members that really, they got offers to go to other shows, but they all decided to stay because they said, like, no, this is the show that everybody wants to be on.
Yeah.
So, that is a large credit to Jack, where he just set the tone of that entire show. It's like, if you have that type of boss and then people willing to, to work, because it was long hours. When we were on set, you're still doing long hours. Mm-hmm. And there's long days, and there are days when everybody's not at their best, but at the end of the day, people still came back.
Yeah.
And so if you can have that, you're doing all the right things. And by Jack, inviting us back every year, we wanted to continue that. We were doing the right things. Try to grow as writers, be as, and eventually step into the roles of, being producers and just learning as much as you can, but also contributing as much as you can, because that's your job first and foremost. You're there to generate stories and ideas.
That's really neat, because I know most shows you got to be at least at the producer level before you're going on set.
No, actually, I would say it depends. Again, it all depends on who's running that show, mm-hmm. and where the show is being shot, and what a show's willing to do. As far as like they want to send writers up. Because like on the Berlanti shows, they'd send staff writers up. They'll send, they'll like on Flash, they were sending, every writer would go up for their episode. Oh yeah. Especially now, more so now than before. But on Arrow, same way. They'll send you up. Even if it's only for a couple of days, you're still up there for a couple of days. Mm-hmm. On Legacies, Brett and Julie, they send the writers, and they send the writers. The writers go, they're there for the full freight. They're there, like, prep all through, prep, then right into production, and until the end of production, and they're back,
Wow.
And then, so, yeah.
Yes,
I've heard a lot of shows that only the showrunner goes.
It varies. It depends on who you're working for and what their philosophy is. I mean, I know one of the things you wanted to talk about, not to jump ahead, was the showrunner training program, and which we're involved with this year. And in talking to all the different showrunners, you kind of get a sense of what their philosophies are when it comes to that. There's some mm-hmm. who believe that my writer's place is in the room because that's where I need them the most, and I'll deal with the other stuff. There's some who believe I need to have a balance in my life because I can't be 24/7 in this. I need to exist beyond the show, for my own mental well-being. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to let my writers be empowered and have them be my voice on set.
It's an extension of
it. All depends on who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a showrunner could be like, "You shall not pass." Like, I'm going to be the only one in control of everything.
Yeah.
But that way is also a burnout that that they can experience, and also it depends on the length of the shows, I think, because you got shows that run to do 22 episodes. No showrunner wants to be involved like going to set every single day, especially if it's out of the state, right? If it's like it's one thing that if you're like here where like our buddy Joe Henderson, who's co-showrunner for Lucifer, that show shoots right here on the Warner Brothers lot, and so the writer's office is right there, and so they go from the writer's office to walk about 30 feet away, and they're right on the set. Like, so there's a kind of a bit of a luxury of like, I'm gonna go to set and check things out, and then I'll go back into the room. You can do that. Whereas Legacies shot in Georgia, so that's that's all the way. It's like a 4.5 hour, 5 hour flight. Yeah. And a time difference. Like when we're on Warehouse 13, the 3 hour time difference kind of like you had to adjust to that because stuff was already being shot by the time you get into the office. Things are going wrong, so it's a lot of the conversations. or if you're there in Toronto and then you need to talk to the studio, again, it's a 3-hour time difference. Or if they're saying like, well, we got a 4:00 notes call, it's already 7:00 at night in Toronto. And you're like, what I do is like, do I really have to sit around this phone call 7:00 at night when especially if you're on a day when it's shot during the day and your day is already wrapped, and it's like, well, now we got to get back to the spot in time for a notes call. That sort of thing. Just like those adjustments, and then you have friends that shoot shows in Prague. Good Lord. Wow. Halfway around the world. So, but these are all fun problems to have, and if you're very fortunate to be in these situations, then then I think the thing, like as Ben was saying in the showrunner training program, there's no one way to run a show. You just got to run the show.
Well, I know we'll talk more about showrunner training later, but knowing that, do you try to go for, like, say you have 3 different showrunner meetings you could go to? Do you pick the ones that you've heard? Oh, this showrunner leads this way, or are you just going for any job that's up?
Well, it depends on where you are. Like if you're desperate, you're like, whatever. I just need a job. I haven't worked in 3 seasons.
But even
you always want to check the showrunner and what their philosophy is. You want to know going in. Yeah,
I think in the category of life's too short, there have been situations Ben and I are like, even though we might be hurting, it's like we'll tell our reps like, nah, don't even bother. We have no interest in that that especially with that person. No, that's not.
We're like, oh, this is the coolest concept, and we really want to be a part of it. But who's in charge? Oh,
yeah,
no, thank you.
Wow. And I think we also have the luxury of it's much harder to do when you're first starting out, right? Because you just want to get in that room, you want to be a part of the show, and also it should be hopefully in a case of a situation where you get on there, as Ben and I used to joke all the time, is like, that's above our pay grade. Like when stuff would go down that just was not like, ooh, we're glad we're not in those conversations. That's above our pay grade, right? But now we're actually in those conversations, and so you have to figure out. Oh, look at the puppy! Look at that puppy!
Sorry,
distraction.
He's awake.
Ratings for the podcast just went up.
Right? But to keep it short, I'll just say those type of situations are vastly different where we were, where we are now. That we have that sort of ability to say like, okay, we can be a little bit smarter and have this sort of luxury of picking where we want to work a bit more now than when you're first starting out. You're like, give me, please, just hire me. We're cute, lovable, and cheap, right? It's like,
I mean, I'm not going to say that there aren't credits on our resume that we were just like, all right, we'll take it.
Well, we'll take it, but even then, it was more to the strategy of like, okay, we'll take it and use it.
Who we're getting involved with,
people that we're working with, and then also on top of that allows us to do the next thing. Right, this town sort of operates off of the what's next? What you got going next, right? And you're always like looking at it as stepping stones. So you get that first staffing job, you're like, okay, I'm on this show. How much experience can I learn? Like, what is it that I can take away from it? What shouldn't I take away from it? That was the other thing that we always.
That's the bigger lesson.
Yeah, that's the bigger lesson of like how not to run a show, right?
Yeah.
And then or how not to to conduct yourself in a room and on set and all that type of stuff. But then you just continue to climb. So you get to that point where you're like, okay, now we're at a place of like, now that we've had the fortune of being in part of the showrunner training program. Now we have a little bit more of a recognition of like, oh, okay, these guys are ready or should be more ready and more prepared because they've been vetted by people that said these people are ready to run their own show. And so we're just at that. We're right there teetering on the edge of being able to demonstrate that.
Very cool. And it's really cool that your first time out of the gate you were on a show that went 5 seasons in a supportive staff like that. I hear a lot of writers who just getting on staff isn't necessarily the golden ticket because it maybe their first experience wasn't great. Maybe it got canceled halfway through. And
Yep.
sometimes there are 3, 4, 5 different shows before they finally hit that one where they can be there in a groove for a little while and get their bearings.
Yeah.
That is especially nowadays, because now all the shows that have much more shorter orders, much more unpredictable sort of orders. I have friends that work on shows. They work in a room, and the room is done before a single frame of the episode is shot. And they're moving on to it, and they're moving on to another show. So they can, like, within a year's time, they could be on 3 different shows.
Wow.
Especially in the streaming world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean that happened to us even in the regular TV / basic cable world. Like we got fired after season 3 of Flash, along with we were the 14th, 15th writer to be fired on 3 seasons of that show. But then we went on. We worked on Scream, which was only a 20-week room for us. And then the showrunner Brett Matthews produced the 6-episode season by himself down in Atlanta. Because we were all done, and we'd moved on to another show for Stars called Black Samurai, which only ended up being a room. The show never went forward. And that was before, and we did that. It was supposed to be a 10-week thing, ended up being a 20-week thing, which then became a 30-week thing. And by week 29, we're like, I don't think this is ever going.
Yeah.
And fortunately, Beth Schwartz reached out to us and said, "Do you want to come over to Arrow?" And we're like, "Yeah, sure."
Is your signal breaking up, or is because you seem clear, but you don't seem clear?
I don't know who you're pointing at.
Skype kind of goes in and out a bit like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about those, because I hear a lot about that. I was talking to a Supergirl writer who I think after the 3rd season he got fired. It seems like is that strictly a budget thing? Like, is that
no?
It's creative,
that was a whole different can of worms. I mean, without getting too deep into it, there was a showrunner who that was his MO, and it was one of those things where he built a reputation being that guy, and we'd worked with him in the past and didn't think it was going to be that way, and it turned out to be that way. So it was an unfortunate situation, but it changed in the wake of the Me Too movement. So I think that's all we need to say about that.
Yeah. Well, at least you were still able to continue in that family of shows without being hurt by that. Yes,
because the reputation of the show kind of overshadowed the fact of what happened with us. It was sort of recognized like, oh, it's not normal for a show that's successful, that's getting renewed, that is getting an increased order each season, to lose at least 3 or 4 writers at every season, whether it's at the midpoint, when the 13 weeks are up in the contract before the back 9 pickup, or at the end of the season to then jettison people. It wasn't common, and it spoke to a different managerial philosophy that a lot of agencies were reticent to send their clients to, because it just wasn't the person that was overseeing the shows wasn't quite doing it the way the shows needed it. I mean, the shows are successful, so
yeah,
I guess people sort of take that as, well, let's just let it go, and even they shouldn't have.
Yeah.
Anyway,
well, those are some of the trials and tribulations that it's important to know that it's not so cut and dry. Like, you just get your job and happily go for 5 years and that kind of thing.
No, it's not. It's like the way that he would put it is if you were a first year NBA rookie, right? It's like you got one, you got that shot, you got that sort of contract, and you're there. But if you're riding that bench, and you don't produce, they'll cut you loose, right? They'll be like, all right, we'll trade you. We'll trade you, or your career washes out completely. And there is that sort of fear and I think though, because the fact that it's different now, where the pros and cons of it is there's so much more content now, or there was, I should say, where it was like, even if you just watched, if one show got canceled or ended, if you were good, you could find yourself, quickly on another show. If you're, but the cons again is like, when you're first starting out, the whipsaw sort of experience of being on this show and then going back onto another show, it's just, you're never able to settle down. You're always wondering, like, okay, is the rug going to be pulled out from under me while I'm here on this room? And how much experience am I really going to get? And I think that's the other thing where we learned in the showrunner training program. And again, we'll get more into it, is the fact that there's so many more writers that don't have the experience that we have of like coming up through the ranks, of really sort of growing as writers in an organic manner. If now it's just writers, they're in a room, but they don't get the set experience. They don't get the post experience. They don't get all the stuff that happens to make a show. And so then all of a sudden they just, they might jump from show to show to show, and all of a sudden they rise up there in their producer level ranks, but they don't have the producer level experience. So the time that they're giving a show, now they don't know what to do exactly, how to run a show, because they've never really had that experience, other than just the quick pops of observation of working in something like that.
Yeah, I've also heard of a number of writers who the episode order will be short, but their contract says they can't do anything else. There's
definitely that problem. I think that's also being addressed, because there's just no sort of humane way of saying, like, well, you can't work. Like that's just, it's crazy, but they'll try to do that. And again, I think it also depends on the level you are, because if you're say a co-EP, supervising producer or something like that, then the studio might have much more reason to say, like, well, yeah, you can't work on this because we might need you to go to set. Whereas a staff writer, they're going to hold you for 20 weeks. And if they can cut you loose, they'll cut you loose, unless you are so valuable to the showrunner. Like when we were on Scream, we did Scream, it was 20 weeks in the room, and MTV kept on adjusting the schedule, and there kept on being setbacks where we were supposed to start shooting, like, what was it, summer? Well, we started in April, and we were supposed to start shooting in the summer because they were aiming for a Halloween release, a late fall release. And that the schedule kept on getting pushed back, that we were able to break the entire season, write all six scripts, and then the room ended, and then poor Brett had to go to Atlanta and produce all 6 episodes himself. Now, fortunately, it was only 6 episodes, but he was still out there by himself because we were already moved on. We were gone.
Yeah, he was there from like end of August through like Thanksgiving or something like that. Like just a ridiculous amount of time.
Wow.
Yeah,
but he did it. And the show came out good. I mean, at the end of the day, we were all proud of what we did, and we kind of, again, regardless of what the exposure or the audience reaction, we achieved what we set out to do, and that was a very cool experience and very refreshing in the wake of what we had just had on Flash. The two just very different experiences. But again, and all of which taught us something. All of which we walked away going, okay, here are the operative lessons that we're going to carry with us whenever we are lucky enough to have a room of our own. And the wisdom that we've gained and gleaned, we're going to hopefully impart that to another generation of writer that will then be the next generation of showrunner. I mean, there's a lot of paying forward in this business. And we're firm believers in that because we feel like it was done for us. I mean, Deric can attest to this. I don't believe I've earned anything. I still feel like I have to prove myself on a daily basis. I don't feel like, and right? I mean, it's we've been writing partners 20 years. He knows. It's just it's one of those things that like every day you gotta show up and you gotta be at your best, and you're not always going to be. I need to learn to forgive myself a little bit more. This is a bit of a confessional, but I won't. Because that's not how I operate.
Okay, well, let's just take quick break to hear from sponsors, and then we'll come back and talk about the showrunner training program. DrivingFootage.com provides 4K 9-angle driving plates for film and television. Over 14,000 clips are available for locations all around Southern California, with more areas coming soon. A fully equipped camera car with height-adjustable rig is available for custom shoots and second-unit photography. Visit DrivingFootage.com for details. AVGearGuide.com provides computer and gear rentals serving the LA area, including laptops with Final Draft, as low as $9 a day with long booking rates available. They also scan photos, documents, video and audio tapes, and film reels to digital, so you can easily share with your friends and family. Mention the name of the TV Writer Podcast and you will get 10% off your order. Visit avgearguide.com for details. Full disclosure, I do own both of these companies. By supporting them, you help me bring new in-person video interviews to you. And we're back.
I was like, it's going to be like,
Well, so you're wearing a toque.
Yeah. Very cool. Love the Canadian reference. So showrunner training program. First of all, how do you get into it? Is it just open to anybody, or do you get invited? And tell me about that program.
it's an application process, just like all the other programs. In this case, they take in about 27 to 28 writers. And we were fortunate enough, they were like close to 200 people that submitted for the program this year. It continues to grow. And
they tend to want people who have shows in contention, like either you're developing a project with a studio or network, or you're already running a show and you've never done it before. It's very much the application is there are limits to it. It's not like just anyone can apply. The ones that will be given serious credence are the ones that have an imminent need to be a showrunner and be trained.
And so at the time when we applied, we had two pilots that we were developing. One with Greg Berlanti, and the other one we were developing right through with Warner Brothers. So that kind of put us on, gave us an edge of like, okay, these guys, one of these shows might go forward, so these guys need to be ready. And also the other thing was, since we had applied in the past, they were already familiar with us and they knew, and so they were already sort of like, you know, they had kept tabs on us to see like where we were. And so, you know, because of our consistency of being, I think Ben is okay. He's not doing that.
I'm signaling for
he's
myself
doing like
to take
air
the dog
traffic
out to poop.
He's calling it off. Yeah, so we were in a place of like, okay, let's, we were encouraged, like, go ahead and apply for the program. And then this time around because the last time we applied for it was a couple years ago, and we actually got to the semifinal stage of it, right? They were like, hey, we're going to, we want to talk to you guys. They sent us a letter saying like, congratulations, you made it to the semifinal stage, but you're not getting selected. But here's a one-day seminar that you guys can attend. And so we went to that. We got a taste of it. We're like, oh, this is really cool. And then that, we didn't think of anything of it again. So when it came around this time around, we were like, all right, we'll apply again. And we got in to our surprise.
Yeah.
Very cool.
It was great. It was 6 Saturdays. Every Saturday we start from like around 8:30 in the morning, go to almost about 5 o'clock. They bring in different speakers, different showrunners, different people from different areas of expertise. Peter Roth spoke at the very first day, which was sort of surreal, because this is the guy that is that's the high muckety muck, right? That's the guy that is the head of Warner Brothers himself, the Warner Brothers Television himself. And you always hear that guy, but we never met him before. And so we got a chance to introduce ourselves. And he did this sort of thing of like, after we introduced ourselves, when he was up there speaking, he goes, and I got my boys up here in the front, Ben and Deric. It was like freaking out. He's like, why is he calling us out? We just met him.
And at lunch, everyone was like, Peter Roth? We're like, no. We met him this morning.
Wow.
But he's like,
Yeah.
he's come from that old school. He's like one of the last, what they call, pillars of the television sort of like icon industries of these moguls, these big studio moguls, right? And this guy is also on that next level sort of class, because I never forget when we were on The Flash and he sent out Christmas cards, he personally signed them,
Wow.
and it was just like, wow. And they were like, yeah, he actually, because I did some digging, I was like, did he really sign these? He goes, no, he signs every Christmas card.
Wow.
And it's like, wow, okay. I was like, that's kind of cool. So, being in the program, we got through 5 Saturdays, and then the pandemic happened. Shut it down. But also after doing a couple of Zooms now, we're supposed to be doing a Zoom for Legacies when we start back up. I was like, why can't we just finish up the last class on Zoom? I'm gonna bring that up. I'm gonna email MC about that and Carol.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you know what? It's like, I know that we've been because they said the last class was postponed indefinitely. But I think in a way, if you just do it on Zoom, there's, you can hold up to 100 people in there for one. Yeah. But also, it's so much easier because all it was like you had people come in, showrunners, and speak. They do Q&A, people ask questions. And that was, and then, there was a little bit of some sort of personal, sort of like you broke up into smaller groups, and you did a little bit more one-on-one time. But there was a bit of a curriculum where it's like, I don't think, see why it can't be transferred onto Zoom. Like, hey, can we just get our last day of class, have those people come in and just do
Zoom,
it?
Zoom can actually break into groups as well.
Yeah.
Like you can break out in groups and come back, and it's really powerful that way.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool. That's what I heard. I haven't done that yet, but yeah, I heard that too. So there's place. But those first 5 Saturdays, they were invaluable. They were really great. And then also all the people that got into the program, these are people that you're actually, as they said, these are the people that you're gonna, as you continue to, work in this industry, these are the people that went through the trenches with you and that you can, reach out to and develop relationships and contact. And these are the people that, you can trade notes back and forth. But hey, what's your experience been like, so forth and so on. And, or I'm stuck in a jam, need some help here, input on how would you handle this type of thing. So bring, that sort of that network that you get to have. Yeah. The additional network.
What are a few of the key takeaways that you've gotten from this? Like things that maybe you heard that you hadn't thought of before, or maybe they sort of crystallized for you better in this time?
Well, you what you do is each session was sort of geared toward a different subject that you were going to face at some point. So it was like how to manage your schedule, how to manage your writer's room, how to manage your talent, how to manage executives. And all of those were sort of invaluable lessons as to, I have this experience with this from my own career, but I've never thought of it from this perspective, or I've never approached it from that way of doing it. And all the different speakers that came in, the anecdotes that they shared, their little journeys along the way, the little things that kind of were turning point moments for their career, or, basically, make or break decision moments for them and the shows that they were on, how they handled it. That's the thing I think that was incredibly invaluable. I mean, again, everyone's experience was different. Everyone had a different lens that they saw the job through, that whether it's from the people that taught them how to do it onto their, experience as showrunners versus how they then teach the people below them how to do it. It was always an unexpected, like, oh, I never really thought about it that way, or, maybe I'm gonna apply that to the way I do things because I've never done it that way, but it sounds like something I would do. Again, I wish I don't have specific examples off the top of my head, but I remember as we were sitting there and listening to everyone, that these were the things that, I've jotting down notes, like I'm gonna star that note because that's something that I'm going to come up against. And here's a good philosophical approach to handling it. Like, Glenn Mazzara had a list of things.
Oh my God,
Matt Nix had a list of things. And again, different sort of, whether we look at them as commandments or here's my litany of nightmares that I've lived through. Glenn Mazzara had like a 5-page list of.
Yeah, like 300. It's crazy.
Here's what went wrong on
saying like
shows.
every single one of these things happened to me.
Wow.
and you're like, that's not real. And it's like, it all happened. So how would you handle that? And again, gets you thinking, makes you go, all right, if that did happen to me, what would I do?
Yeah, I think
that's the benefit.
Yeah, like Bill Lawrence came in and he was speaking he's like in these here are things that happened to me. How did you think I handled them? And some of them he handled them right, and then some of them he handled them wrong. And he was just saying
admitting that
admitted,
right,
I could have done this better. And I think one of the big takeaways, and this is just in general, as anything, is just be a good communicator. I think a lot of problems lie in not communicating things properly or just not communicating at all. There's this sort of notion of the secrecy and keeping things close to the vest. And it's just why? It's it's a collaborative medium. It's making television is a team effort. It is not, there's not one person that succeeds on this. Everybody has to succeed or has to rise up to a level of being able to accomplish things that they're supposed to do in order for the television show to succeed, right? Because anything can go wrong. I mean, at any given moment, right? It's a miracle any show, any movie's ever made. When you really take a step back, you're just one episode of television, much less a $300 million film. How anything is ever made, it's this is crazy. A lot of ways, as we call it, controlled chaos. It's there's only so much that you're going to be able to control, so much of it. But the thing is, if you're able to communicate, and you're able to communicate with your department heads first and foremost, and the people that you trust and rely upon, and they understand that they can able to communicate with you, I think that in itself is, invaluable sort of, a sort of mindset to have. Okay, this is not about me.
Well, and think about it. I mean, you can't do everything, right? Let's say you've got a production designer who is just a genius. Don't you just want to bask in that? You don't want to be the one to sort of micromanage and be like, oh, I want to say this and this. It's just let you hire the right people to do the job and let them do their jobs, and you get a better result because they get emotionally invested in the work, just like you are. One of the things that came up in the showrunner training program is that no one's going to care about your show as much as you do. Probably true. But the way to sort of get everyone close is by letting them sort of be their best selves and not, being the one that's constantly micromanaging. So it's interesting.
Very cool. Well, I would think it'd be a big advantage to be a writing team, showrunning team, because one person can be putting out fires, the other person can be running the room, and you can sort of tag team that way.
I will say this, coming out of the program, it's I'm just even more in awe of people that can just run a show by themselves, because you're just, good Lord, how are you able to handle all that as one person? It's insane. But then there's also the the whole thing about it is 100% burnout rate for showrunners. So it's right. So
we'll take for us it's a 50% burnout. I think we've been able to go on that.
Yeah. So let's move on from that and talk a little bit about Deric. You're at a ton of conventions. I see you all the time. Is it important to you guys to? What's that? Yeah. By the way, my wife and daughter say hi.
Yeah. Hi.
Yeah. Is it important to you to mentor others and is that an active part about what you do?
I don't know if it's I would say active part. It's just natural for me. I mean, because I've been so fortunate to get where I am. There's been so many great mentors and friendships and people that believed in me and that supported me and that wanted to help, and vice versa along the way. I like Ben said, and we're both of the mindset of pay it forward. So we're always, trying to look out for the next group of writers, the next people that have been in the position that we've been in, or maybe even more so than that. So there's a natural tendency to try to help as many people as you can, but within the limits, because at the same time, you'd still have to, I always say you have to take care of self before you can take care of others properly, right? If you can't take care of yourself, then what good are you going to be to others? So you have to you have to find that sort of balance. But yeah, it's like I think that we both do it. So it's not out of duty or necessity. It's just something that we like to do when we can.
When we fired our agents back in April, and the WGA staffing boost and WGA Solidarity Challenge started happening, I took as active a part as I could in that, just because I felt like how freaking lucky I am to have been in this business for over a decade, and I know people are still trying to break in, and I know how hard it is. I get it. It took us 8 years of trying, and had somebody not just believed in us, we wouldn't have, that door never would have opened. So I'm like, all right, let me see what I can do. And again, I don't feel like it was a lot to do. I felt like it was very easy to read a bunch of scripts, and if the ones that I liked, just tweet about it. Like, how hard is that?
And Ben really put his, he put his time in. He really did. He did more than I did. It was just because I was doing some other stuff. But
you're on the guild's board, so different level of time management.
A little bit. But Ben would read script after script. He'd have his pile of scripts and he'd be reading them, and then he'd actually get back to people in a timely manner, and it's really wonderful to see. And then so many other writers did the same thing. Have stepped up and done so much during this time of uncertainty or the pandemic that have really tried to help out people. And again, going all the way back to where it started, even before I met Ben, my mentor Ashley Miller. At that point in time, I met him at a comic book convention here in LA, the LA Comic Book Convention. Yeah. And it was because my best friend and I, we went to go watch the brand new X-Men trailer, right? Mm-hmm. And while there, it was really crowded at the Shrine Auditorium. And we're jockeying for position on the second floor balcony, trying to, that overlooks down onto the floor of the Shrine. And we're waiting for the trailer to start, and I'm bumping elbows with this guy, and I'm just like, okay, we're either going to fight or we're going to talk. So I started talking to him, and it's Ashley, and Ashley had just moved out here from Washington, D.C. to start his staffing job on Andromeda. And so I did that thing that, they always say you're not supposed to do, is like, hey, I'm a writer too. I'd love to pick your brain and talk, and I'd love for you to read something of mine. And Ashley was kind enough to say, sure, I'll read something. And at the time I had a screenplay that I wrote based on a book that I loved, and it was just a spec. And he read it and met over dinner in Studio City, and he said, I see no reason why you can't make it in this business. And then from there, he just sort of unofficially became my mentor. We'd meet once a week over dinner. And then after dinner, we walked down the street over to the Andromeda's writer's room. And that's where I got, my first look at a writer's room, seeing whoa, this is how you make television? This is crazy. Or how you write TV? Because I had no idea how television was written. I thought it was written like screenplays. You just sit down, you start writing stuff. But then you're seeing the board and seeing the outlines and everything broken up there, and then the beats of it. And I was just like, whoa, this is cool. And about 6 months later was when Ash called me up out of the blue and he said, hey, so the writer's assistant on the show is leaving. I think you have a really good shot at it. You should come in and interview for it. Wow. And I did. And that's when Robert hired me, and who became my next mentor in that way. And as Zach Stentz and, everybody from there. And it was just even Ben, because Ben had more experience as a writer than I did. So it was just from there. And so every time that I was, fortunate enough to be in a place of where, if I knew an assistant on a show and we were on a show, I made sure, always to ask the assistants questions how's your writing coming along? What are you doing for your writing? Doing stuff as much as encouragement to show, because I was in that, I sat in those same chairs. And, I just wanted to show and demonstrate that you won't be sitting in those chairs for long if you continue to, do the things that you need to do to become a writer. But this is what you're going to have to do. This is what you should do. Just trying to help them navigate those scary waters. Sometimes it doesn't seem like there's any sort of, you feel like that you're just running your head into a wall, right? There are times when after I was a writer assistant on a show called it was the Twilight Zone. It was the UPN's Twilight Zone that was where Forrest Whitaker was the host, right? Yeah. And being on that show after that show ended, they didn't get any more writer's assistant gigs. There was nothing available. So I had to get jobs elsewhere, temp jobs and all that stuff. And it just felt like the further that I was moving away from Hollywood, as far as trying to find a job, I felt like I didn't have any sort of real way back in. But my anchor in that point in time was working with Ben, being friends, continuing to, write with Ben, saved me from completely drifting away in a way where a lot of people don't have that, So if I can be sort of like that lighthouse for some people, and Ben also the same way, if we could be that lighthouse again, showing like, hey, you can find your way back if you feel like you get lost. That's, that in itself is nice to see when you see people, and especially when you see people succeed and stuff. So I think that, again, it's just sort of like it's our natural tendency. I don't think it's our duty, or it just sort of happens when it does and stuff. As much. Yeah,
we've worked with a lot of writers, that are, well, again, they're support staff, but they are writers, and they're, they've gotten a shot to do a freelance episode, or they've gotten to co-write an episode, or they asked to, can you read my sample or whatever, and I'm like, you're a better writer than me.
Yeah,
frankly, like at your age and at this skill level, like I didn't have this then. All I had to go on was, the arrogance that I had any idea what I was doing, and I like to think that I backed my way into an ability just by sheer determination, and I think these people have it too, and it's like you want to get to that position where you can reward them for that, because they deserve that shot. They deserve to be at the table. They deserve to have their voice heard in story on screen.
Very cool. Well, we're going to wrap things up in just a second, but first I'd like to sort of end up with advice to greener writers, like sort of if you could speak to yourself when you're on your way in, what are the things that you've learned that you'd love to have said to you at the start, or things, maybe mistakes you see people making on the page or off the page?
I say be patient.
Yep.
You're going to have to persevere. It's going to take time. You're going to get frustrated. You're going to want to give up. You're going to want to say, screw it, this isn't going to happen. It will. It only happens if you keep going. So just don't do everything you can to keep yourself afloat. I understand that you can't always just spend your whole life writing, but if it's what you really want, and you can find a way to sustain yourself in your free time, make this be your passion, make this be the thing that drives you, and you will eventually cross that finish line.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Deric?
And I think the other thing is check your ego at the door. It's like, and honestly, especially, as a young writer, that you think you know everything, you think you know how to tell a story, you think you know how to write character, but if someone comes along and says, no, you don't, listen to them. Figure out later on that they might be full of, what is this? Is this a PG? I don't want to say. I was about to curse. I was like, full of it, right? Mm-hmm. So, but you figure it out later on. In the moment, listen, always listen, and just learn. Try to be a sponge. Try to learn as much as possible. That's the thing. Be a student. You never stop being a student. Even now, I have friends that are brilliant writers, fantastic writers. They never stop learning. They're still working on honing their craft. Ben continues to just work harder than most people I know that just trying to be a better writer. And that in itself is inspiring, because then I look at it, I'm like, I'm procrastinating a lot. I'm just like, I guess I should do the same thing.
But I will give you the credit for this. The fact that one thing that Deric has always done in our career that I've never had the guts to do is he shares the material. He looks to other people for their input and says, tell me what you think of this. And he hears it with an objective ear. Whereas I don't want anybody to look at this. I don't know. I'm just going to put the blinders on, and I'm just going to go forward. I'm trusted. Hopefully this is good. And he's like, no, if it's not, I want to know. So let's improve it. And, I've been lucky in that he comes back to me. He's like, so I let so-and-so read this thing. I'm like, man, why'd you do that? And he's like, but they got some good notes. I'm like, yeah, those are really good notes. I'm glad you did that. So,
very cool. Well, you guys have been very generous with your time. I appreciate you taking all this time. And
no, thank you. It was a lot of fun.
No,
I got a 3:00 appointment in my kitchen, but other than that, my day is pretty open. You know, it's like that commute to my kitchen is going to be kind of tough, though. I will have to say.
Very cool.
And I'm not sure how well my son walked my dog, so I'm going to go do that.
Very cool. Well, thanks, guys.
No, thanks so much.
Care.
Yeah, cool. And say hello to your daughter.
I will. Make sure to subscribe on all of the places you can find this podcast: YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, and also make sure to rate the podcast and submit your comments. Please do follow me on Twitter, @GrayJones is my handle, and also visit tvwriterpodcast.com/support for details on how you can become a patron of this podcast for as little as 25 cents per episode. Well, that's it for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. Watch for these episodes every Tuesday from now on. You can find them in all the different places that this podcast is found. But I appreciate you joining me. See you next time. Bye-bye.